Hi everybody, this is Greg Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was created by Tom, who's from Oregon. Tom recently created this image on my Spirit of Whidbey Island workshop. Metadata, Canon 40D, effective focal length of about 34 millimeters, ISO 400 f8 and 1/25 of a second is the metadata. When I first talk about the things that I like in this image, one of the things that I love here is quality of light. Because this was shot on the workshop, I know the location, I know when we were there, and we were there at a time where we have the potential for multi-dimensional lighting. This is near end of the day light, so Tom has sunlight that's lower on the horizon, warmer, directional. That's hitting in some places in the image, and then the rest of the scene is being illuminated by a very large light source, the rest of the sky on a partly cloudy to clear day. So we have warm, direct contrast, and then very soft and open and cool blue. I really encourage you to be able to see, identify, and to work with multi-dimensional qualities of light. For so many of the scenes that you photograph, scenarios that you photograph, multi-dimensional lighting is going to make your photography a lot more physically and emotionally appealing to the viewer of your images. The other thing that I really enjoy here is rhythm. There's a lot of geometry here that repeats in the construction of the wall and the construction of the windows, two of the main subjects. It even ends up repeating and the stool because of the slats and just what's happening in terms of the negative space shapes that are being implied down here. And there are other rhythms outside of just the idea of the construction of the building and the stool. You have a really beautiful simple rhythm with this triangle at the bottom of the negative space and the triangle at the top up here. And because of all of the shapes that are in the wall here, you have the potential for an enormous amount of rhythm based on shape. And one of my favorite of those rhythms is this shape, very powerful archetype, and then it gets implied half of it over here in this negative space. Really nice echo that moves on a very important diagonal in the image, the way we want to move from top left to bottom right. The other thing that I really enjoy here is just the storytelling potential for this image, just the archetypes and the images that are being presented. I think one of the most powerful things Tom has done here is, instead of describing the whole building by coming in and just shooting a part of it, he abstracts this a little bit. He takes it from something that's literal to something that is a space that everybody can imagine and sitting themselves in, because it is more abstract. That's a very, very powerful thing to consider. Less is more so much of the time in any kind of storytelling. It doesn't matter whether you're writing songs, writing poetry, writing a novel, or trying to tell a story with a photograph. Less is more. When we include things that are very emotionally empowering, invigorating, exciting, then the viewer a lot of times is going to fill in the blanks of whatever we left out, and their imagination is going to be a lot more powerful almost all the time than anything else that we could include as we frame our subjects or compose our photographs. In addition to the unconventional cropping on the building, the other thing that's powerful here is just the archetypes. And from a storytelling standpoint, the wall or the obstacle is very powerful. An opening in the wall. Not only that, we're heavily drawn to this as human beings. We're very, very drawn to light, and we're very, very drawn to warmth. And warm light really draws us. It's the inside of our homes. It's the warmth and the survival of the fire, so on and so forth. And the window is a very real powerful archetype here. It's just stunning how you not only go through this window and go to the interior, then you see all the way through the building to the other side, and you get drawn like you do here all the way through the whole space into another dimension. And an empty chair, an empty stool, an empty bench, super powerful archetype from a storytelling standpoint. Lots of things to enjoy about Tom's image here. In a perfect world, I'd like to create a version of this image that is more mysterious, doesn't deliver so much to the viewer at one time in terms of value of tone. And I'd like to corral the eye a little bit more. And I'd also like to change up the color here just a little bit. So let's talk about these things. I've been talking quite a bit lately about how If you do no processing or minimal processing and you're working with either a RAW file or a JPEG that's being processed by your camera at default settings, if you expose in an average way, on a scene like this, Tom's done a great job of exposure. He's protected his highlights here. So much of the time what you're going to end up with is a file from a local and global contrast standpoint that can be pretty flat, because instead of this being the 5 stops of dynamic range that slide film could express, this is now 8 stops. So we have a very long range of information here. That's great as a starting point, but if we want to push the idea of form, if we want to push the idea of visual excitement, so much of the time low end, heavy shading, heavy blacks, and local contrast is going to be what's going to do that. One of the things that I do to this image just right off the bat is dramatically darken it, and I did that. So here's the before, and here is the after. The difference now is the difference between an image where most of the values are near the middle or in the middle, so all of this gets delivered to the viewer. This is counterintuitive. You would think if you got a good average exposure and your lighting pattern wasn't complicated, that would be simple for the viewer to comprehend. The problem is what the viewer is drawn to. The viewer is drawn to information that's easily discernible, and when a lot of ideas in your image are medium or close to it or brighter, then all of it all at once I have to deal with this area and this area and this area and the chair, instead of starting at a place that from a proportion standpoint has more energy than everything else and then moving out from there and making a journey, knowing where to start and then making other discoveries along the way instead of being confronted with everything at one time. So I personally would dramatically darken this. Remember, if you're streaming in the video, it'll be over dark because the video is compressed. Remember, you can download the Daily Critique for free. Then you'll be watching a very high quality QuickTime movie that looks very close to what I'm seeing on my monitor right now. After darkening, one of the things that happened is that this shadow down in here seems too flat, and I really want to draw the eye to this area of model light in the stool, so I applied a levels adjustment layer locally to that area to increase the local contrast, and also to make the contrast down in here feel like it does in here and up in here and up in here after that initial darkening. So there's the before and after on the darkening, and look, I did this in normal blending mode, which in addition to darkening did what else for me? It made the colors a lot more vibrant, and I personally like that. So I don't want to change that. There's one aspect to color that I'm going to change at the end where the color jumped up, and I'm not happy with that, but I didn't really feel that or see it until the end of working on this image. There's the addition of the contrast in the lower part of the image to give the part with the stool a little more oomph. Here is adding to this dapple light that's hitting the wall, so I just exaggerated that with the levels adjustment, applying it locally. There is before and there is after. I'm doing that to draw attention to that area. I'm also doing it because the light is so strong up in here, so a little bit's kind of trying to balance the top and the bottom in an image that has a real strong sense of balance to begin with. And when I got to here, I thought, you know, one of the things that's now bothering me about this is how blue this wall is. And the reason that it's bothering me is, to me, this is not a shot that is about color to the exclusion of everything else. It's an image that, to me, is a lot about story. And I don't want the wall to have as much weight as it has right now just based on color. Remember, color sits in front of even the ideas or the images of your subjects, and I don't want the blue of that wall to do that. Here's another reason why, after looking at this for a short amount of time, the viewer might really get confronted with the blue here. It's just very different than the way that you perceive a granite block wall. It isn't this blue. Sure, it's reflecting a lot of blue light now, but somebody that's not a photographer doesn't see this blue. You have to pre-visualize that. The reality of our brains is our brain is constantly white balancing. You look over here and it white balances to the dominant light source. You look over here and it white balances to this, and that happens in such a quick instance that you don't have any concept that that is happening. You're just constantly white balancing. So for all those reasons, I want to warm the wall up a little bit. Here's the before, and here is the after. More time was the before, and then here is the after. And for me, there's a huge physical difference in the way that I experience the image and a huge emotional difference in the way that I experience the image. The wall now, even though it's still cool, it has some aspect overall sort of warmth that goes with the warmth of the scene. And there are some places now where that granite block to my eye looking at it on a color calibrated monitor can appear or feel like it is gray relative to everything else, and so it just feels more normal, so the wall doesn't have as much weight. And I don't want the wall to be a heavily weighted thing if I was the one that was editing this image. I love this image. It's so beautiful in so many different ways. It has great light. There's a great choice of subject matter. There's a brilliant framing here to make it more personal for each person that sees it. Really strong image. I want to say a big thank you to Tom for first taking the workshop. All the people who took my Spirit of Whidbey Island workshop, big thank you to all of you. I had a fantastic time. We had a fantastic time together. Big thank you to Tom for being generous twice and letting us work with his images on the free video content on the Mindful Eye. Hope to see you again very soon.